The goal of content marketing should be to establish your healthcare practice as a thought leader in your specialty in your specific region. To develop more potential patient opportunities, you need to have a plan to communicate in a way to establish trust with your potential clients. Essentially, what you need is a healthcare-based content marketing strategy. To explain what I mean, let me talk to you about a real quick case study that we've done for one of our clients. We helped one of the largest healthcare companies in the United States generate over 1.6 million visits to their website. That was about a 1,611% increase from their last provider. And once they were there, those clients were able to generate about 10 times the amount of page views. Now, why does that matter? Because of ROI. When we started to look at the ROI from that approach, what we realized is that this specific strategy turned into over $13 million worth of first-time appointment revenue. This did not include surgery or therapy after treatment. This was literally first-time appointments, and we valued that at only $300. So that was $13 million worth of first-time appointment revenue with the value of $300 per first-time appointment. So how did we do it? Now let me walk through our unique process. I'm going to get very specific here because each part matters. We have specifically designed this system over the last 20 years to generate leads, nurture leads into clients, and then convert those clients into fans of your mission, your brand, and your practice. So let me walk through it. Step number 1 is the gap assessment. Step number 2 is something we call usability conversion analysis. Part 3 deals with SEO. The next part deals with content strategy, lead nurturing, social media, paid advertising, video development, and analytics and reporting. Now what I want to do is focus on certain parts of that unique process. The first thing I want to do is talk about buyer personas. When I'm talking about buyer personas, essentially what I'm talking about is the idea of segmenting your audience to make sure that we get the right message to the right potential clients at the right time. Now let's talk about what we don't want to do. Let's pretend like I have an ACL tear and I'm trying to get more information about knee pain. But because you keep marketing to all the same patients with all the same messaging, it's very possible that I might be getting a drip marketing message from your team that talks about how great your spine center is. If I have an ACL tear, I don't care about your spine center. But if you properly segmented, you would have made sure that the content related to knee pain and knee surgery and treatment areas related to the knee only get sent to the people that opted in for knee pain information. The next thing I want to do is talk about are different types of approaches. Obviously in the beginning, when you're talking about buyer personas, you have to have a wide net approach. The reason why I'm saying that is because if you have 16 different treatment areas or 16 different specialties, it's going to take a long time to dedicate enough time to marketing in each one of your specialties. So in the very beginning, we need to have a wide net approach. And the wide net approach basically means that if anybody has pain in any of the specific areas that deal with specialties, that they also think of your organization, your practice, and your brand. But what I also want to do is get to a very buyer persona specific approach. And what do I mean by that? If I go on to Facebook, let's say, I'm not going to say, hey, my name is Chris Carr, I love soccer and I love movies on Netflix and I also have back pain. The reality is that last part where I talk about my back pain, that never makes my personal story. So it's going to be very hard for me to use certain marketing approaches that are going to identify the fact that I have back pain. But if you looked at my Facebook profile or my LinkedIn profile or anything that showed, hey, you know what, I'm also an avid cyclist, which basically means that I ride a bike a lot. And when I ride a bike, over time, what happens to all cyclists is they start to have bad joints. You know, not only do we fall a lot, but we usually have bad hips, knees, and I have a lot of lower back issues. So what we're able to do here with this approach is we might not be able to say, oh, this is Chris Carr and he has back pain and I know where to find Chris Carr. But what I am able to do is I am able to find cycling enthusiasts. And through the process of elimination, I'm able to say, if I can reach these cyclists and make them think about my organization, I know where these individuals are that are going to have this chronic pain in their knee, their spine, and their hip. So what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to be able to make very targeted marketing materials for that specific buyer persona. The next part of our approach, I want to talk about lead generation through SEO and paid advertising. Right? And when I'm talking about SEO, there's a lot of strategies dealing with local SEO. What I'm going to be talking about in this particular strategy deals more with organic SEO. And so what we do is we talk about something that we call the Skyline Analogy. And the Skyline Analogy kind of works like this. Let's pretend we have a city skyline. I live in the city of Philadelphia, and so this is basically an image of the Philadelphia skyline. Now, when we work with practices, they say, hey, you know what? The terms that I want are usually the terms that are going to bring in the most traffic. And we're going to pretend like those keywords are these skyscrapers. You know, there's these big, tall buildings that you can see from a mile away. You see, every practice in the United States wants those same exact keywords or those same exact buildings. And just because you want them doesn't mean that you can get them, at least not without a strategy. And so here's how we recommend that we develop a strategy. The thing we need to do is we need to increase your domain authority. And one of the number one ways to increase your domain authority is to follow Google's best practices, to establish yourself as a thought leader, and to communicate effectively. And when you're communicating effectively, one of the number one things that you're going to do is you're going to speak with authority on critical subject matters. And when you're doing that, not only are you going to talk with authority, what you're also going to do is you're also going to communicate with consistency. So here's what we're going to do, is that we're going to use our technology to find keywords that drive a ton of search volume, but they have less competition and they have less keyword difficulty. The reason why we're doing that is because the large majority of companies are all competing for the top 20% of keywords. But what they don't know that we do is how to identify the 70 to 80% of other keywords, these kind of misfit toys that they don't even know about, that are going to drive a ton of traffic to your website, but with less competition. And studies show that this approach, that the keywords that we go after, commonly convert way stronger and faster than these broader terms. Now let's go back to that skyline analogy. What you're seeing here is rather than going after the skyscrapers or these really big keywords right off the bat, what I need to do is I need to look for this tipping point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you found for maybe hundreds or even thousands of those keywords, as you can see here in the skyline that's represented in orange. But that tipping point I was talking about, the tipping point essentially means that I've developed enough authority in the eyes of Google. I'm already on the first page of Google for maybe hundreds or thousands of words. And now I've earned the right to be heard. And so when I want to start to communicate and I want to start to go after some of these bigger keywords, I'm able to do so because basically Google says, you know what, I trust you. I now have what's called trust rank. Other things that we do in that process is we develop an editorial calendar. And the editorial calendar, from an SEO perspective, allows us to communicate not only consistently, but proactively about certain keywords that we want to go after. And if we know that maybe baseball season is coming up in March and April, we know 90 days to 120 days prior to baseball season that we need to start writing content that's going to index with Google. We know that we have to write about some of these keywords that are going to index with Google right in time for baseball season. Other technology that we have allows us to, when we write content for your organization, what our technology does is it analyzes the companies that are already on the first page of Google. And what it does is it says, hey, if you're going to publish this piece of content, as you can see here, you will have a very poor chance of ranking. You don't have the readability score of the other companies that are on page 1 of Google. You don't have enough words on the page compared to the top 10 results. And of the critical keywords that you need to have in that content, you're going to need these 2 critical keywords for this content piece. So now when I know that, so before I even publish this, I know how to communicate effectively in the eyes of Google, how to outshine your competition, and how to do the critical best practices to outrank the companies that are already doing really well for those keywords. Now I want to talk about content strategy. The number one thing that I want to know when I'm thinking about content strategy is I want to be able to know who is engaging with my website. Now you got to keep in mind that there's approaches that you can do that can allow users to opt in to get more information, and that information can be very specific to the treatment areas that they're looking into. But once they've kind of gotten to a place where they're actually requesting service, we have to cut off the engine there because we have to start to consider how HIPAA compliance factors into our approach. So we have an approach that allows us to drip market to people that have opted in, and then we also have an approach through a HIPAA compliance tool that allows us to drip market to people after they've requested treatment. What our technology will also do is it'll allow us to put cookies or tracking code onto people's devices. That's their phone, their desktop, maybe even their iPad. And every time they come to your website, I can see every page that they visited on your website. If they've opened up some of our drip marketing emails that we've sent them, and every time they've engaged with your marketing, I'm able to identify what are the key KPIs that they have basically done, and now I'm able to lead score them. So in this example, this is how this gentleman went from a score from a 0 to an 80. Finally, in that content strategy, what I want to be able to do is also look at something called the buyer's journey or the patient journey. And what I mean by that is that just because I have pain doesn't mean that I'm ready to make my first step with the treatment option. I might be in research mode. So we believe that almost any time people are looking to research how to handle some of the pain that they might be experiencing in their body, they do this in 3 phases: awareness, consideration, and decision level phases. So let's pretend like I'm that cyclist that we were talking about before. In the awareness stage, I might have chronic pain and decide that I want to do something about it. So now in the consideration phase, I'm going to figure out what providers have specialists for my specific pain points, and do they handle my insurance? And then finally, in the decisions level stage, I'm going to say, you know what, now that I know the different types of specialists that might be able to help me, I'm going to decide this provider over this provider, or this surgeon over this surgeon. All of that is factored into the buying decision. But what happens here is that when we go and we look at your website, oftentimes we only have awareness level content and decision level content. And that's a big problem because so many healthcare companies lack that nurturing stage. They don't know how to do it through an opt-in approach, and they don't know how to do it through a HIPAA compliant approach. And what happens here is that we miss that really big gap in the middle. And that is where patients fall through the cracks. So that's a quick review of some of the approaches that we use for our healthcare content marketing strategy. Again, in review, we looked at buyer personas, we looked at lead generation through SEO and paid advertising, and then we also looked through content strategy. If you'd like us to do an analysis on your company's marketing, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to walk through our systems step by step with you.